The time is just gone 6 minutes past 8 p.m. as we continue with the broadcast this evening, Wednesday nights, with myself, Inayat Wadi. And early on, we were unpacking the BRICS summit and looking ahead at part two of tonight's discussion. We are going to be taking a look at the real story behind India and the Israeli alliance. Now, both these countries are under the spotlight for the very same reasons. And we know whatever is taking place in Palestine at this point in time is being mirrored in India. And the question of minorities has always been a talking point. Another major talking point has been the occupations, considering the fact that both the occupations, India of Kashmir and Israel of Palestine, they have been for well over 70 years. To a large extent, we have learned about both these occupations mirroring each other and looking at recent developments. Also, both in Palestine, we know what has happened in Sheikh Jarrah. We've seen what has happened with the demolition of Palestinian homes. We see similar scenario playing out in India as well. We see demolition of homes belonging to minorities and Muslims as well. So to a large extent, one looks at both India and at Israel, and many similarities. And that is what we are going to be unpacking this evening. And my guest tonight, we've got Dr. Manjari Singh, who is an Associate Fellow, Center for Land Warfare Studies out of New Delhi. We've got Feroze Mithiborawala, who is a pro-Palestinian Indian activist. We've got Dr. Ismail Adam Patel, Friends of Aqsa, who will be joining us as soon as we can get in touch with him. But firstly, to both our guests, to Dr. Manjari Singh and also to Feroze Mithiborawala, we thank you. We welcome you to the show this evening. And we thank you for taking time out and talking to us.
Thank you. We are honored to be here.
Thank you so much for having us here.
Right. Dr. Manjari, I'm going to start off with you because, I went through to your website and I actually found it very, very interesting reading. There were a number of articles, obviously, you have written on the subject matter. And the key issue here is we are going to obviously look at the real story behind India and Israeli alliance. And just in your research, in your analysis, in what you've uncovered, in what you've written, how do you see this alliance and how it has evolved over a period of time?
Okay, so if you look at it, the real story, if I may say, about India and Israel, the real story is maybe 2-3 things. One is this alliance is because of the national security aspirations that India has, and this national security aspiration of India is to avoid the two front war, that the probability of a two front war from the northern and the western fronts, that is from Pakistan and from China. So this is what the real story is. The second story is that this is a pragmatic alliance. For a very long time, if you look at it, India and Israel relations could not be emboldened, could not be strengthened, because India had a pro-Arab policy, pro-Arab stance. Since 2003, maybe I will say, since 2000s, India has been digressing from its, it has been trying to dehyphenate its relations. And in 2017, it truly dehyphenated its relations with Israel and Palestine. No, now it's not about India, Israel, Palestine. Now it's India and Israel and India and Palestine. Now, exclusively talking about India and Israel, the relationship is getting emboldened, the relationship is getting bolstered because of the fact that India is a growing economy. India sees itself, wants itself at the global high table, and that is why it wants to grow economically. And for that, it needs to be partnering with a country wherein its strategic matters are handled well, wherein it gets cheaper technology, and in all those stances Israel comes handy. So because of these reasons, because of the fact that, and also because India wants to diversify its defense and arms imports. So because of these reasons, this alliance, we see a furthering of this alliance between India and Israel. So yeah.
Yes, and I'd like to bring Feroze into the discussion. And Feroze, just a question that I asked of Dr. Manjari Singh, just in terms of how do you assess or how do you analyze this relationship between India and Israel?
I think it's certainly shameful, very short term in our thinking. Israel is not a long term player. Israel is no longer a military power. Israel has lost wars in 2000, has lost a war to Hezbollah in 2006. And Hezbollah is a guerrilla army, and they defeated tanks, ships, and fighter planes by the Israelis. So to think that Israel is a military power is because I travel to West Asia very often, so I know what I'm talking about. The other point is that it is not merely a defense agreement. There is also an ideological coming together. Here you have, as there is with the Saudis and with the Israelis also, and with the Christian right. So here you have an alliance which is essentially committed to ethno-religious supremacism in terms of the Jewish worldview, the Jewish Zionist worldview, which is based on ethno-religious supremacism. In India, we of course have what is called the Brahminical or Madhumari caste religious caste supremacism. So they both believe that they are here to kind of, they are the twice born, twice blessed, and here they are to rule the world and to be served by the serfs of the world. So that is one very important element, which now the untouchables in our country, the untouchables, so-called untouchables in our country, are realizing more and more that this entire the upper caste alliance with because Hindutva is essentially the consolidation of the upper caste in India. The from the Brahmins to the Banyas to the Kshatriyas, the ones who form the 15%. What you witness in the BJP and the RSS is the upper caste consolidation of power, and which has been well constructed under Modi and Amit Shah and with all the corporates that are running the show. The other point is that coming to the defense matter, see, Israel is a lost cause. All right. And what are we trying to do? Because we have this horrible normalization. UAE, Saudis, Qatar, Bahrain, Morocco, Egypt, Jordan, this entire normalization process, which is not in sync with the people's sentiment in these countries, because the people really don't matter, especially in the Gulf countries. So that is one thing. The other point is that just coming from the Russia-Ukraine matter, you can see where Israel has actually failed. I mean, they've had to go along with the American pressure on Ukraine and NATO and Russia, and given, I think the quid pro quo is you don't go with Iran on the JCPOA. So I think this breaking between Russia and Israel is very good for the Palestinian cause, and we are going to see more and more of it. And coming to this entire thing of the India, I mean, the point is that the traditional legacy of this country, which was not only under the BJP, not only under Modi, it's not only about 2003. It began 30 years ago in 1992 under Narasimha Rao. This is the post Rajiv Gandhi phase. The point is that 2 weeks before Rajiv Gandhi was assassinated, Yasser Arafat wrote a letter to Rajiv Gandhi, this on record, that there is an international plot to kill you. So it was not mere the LTTE. Rajiv Gandhi was trying to counter the Israeli presence in Sri Lanka, and I think he paid his life for that. The point is, after Rajiv Gandhi coming with Narasimha Rao, then we had this entire India-Israel thing moving ahead. And why only India, when the so-called great Islamic countries like Saudi Arabia with Mecca and Medina right there, when they've had their own under-the-table arrangements with this horrible Zionist regime, which are the Nazis of today, it's very clear. And essentially, I think now, right from B'Tselem to other human rights groups within Israel to human rights groups within the West, the growing lobby within the Democratic Party, who all recognize that Israel is an apartheid state. So essentially, India's commitment to third world solidarity, to the global South, to the non-aligned movement, to the anti-colonial symbol that India was, today we've become a Banya state. We're getting our faida, I mean, our benefit from here, take it from here, benefit from there, take it from there. There are no much principle involved. The West did not have any principles, I'm not taking up them, but I expected a few countries, the ones who are the pillars of the global South, to take that. So India has lost the leadership of the third world 20, 30 years ago. We kept on losing it. We abandoned the non-aligned movement. SARC became defunct, the South Asian because India, Pakistan just can't sit across the table and talk. But today it is within the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, where India, Sri Lanka are all there. And truly the third world leadership is being taken by countries like Iran to Venezuela to Cuba, which was always there, right there, and did not abandon its principles. But the real pillars of the rise of the global south are Russia, China, Iran, the Eurasian pillars. India has joined it because I think after Afghanistan, India realized that we were abandoned by the Americans in Afghanistan. And that is the time, because India was very happy to be called the Indo-Pacific, used against China. So we are part of the Quad. Now something ridiculous called the I2U2, India, Israel, UAE, and US has been formed. So, we are happy to be part of these fancy names, but they don't really account for much. Because India has realized post-Afghanistan that we cannot be used like Ukraine was used against Russia. We will not be used against China. So India is getting pragmatic at least in that context, and standing up to the US in terms of our own resources. But on Israel, we are a pathetic, shameful turnaround which a country has done, which is the case with Saudi Arabia, which is the case with UAE, which is the case with Morocco. Pathetic turnarounds and abandonment of the Palestinian struggle. And as an Indian, I'm totally ashamed of what we've done in the issue of Palestine.
Yes, we appreciate what you've just said, and thank you for that, Feroze. And also getting back to Dr. Manjari. Now, Dr. Manjari, just following up from what Feroze has been talking about, and he's been talking about supremacism, this whole superior mentality or attitude that is being adopted. And looking at India, the situation at this point in time is where you're looking at a government, you're looking at the influence that it is having on large sections of the population in terms of the superiority complex. Again, we know about the Hindutva agenda that has been playing out for a very, very long time. But it is clear that they are becoming bolder and bolder, and we see what is happening at this point in time in India. We see what the suppression of minorities. We see what is happening with even bulldozing of homes. And one would have thought that immediately after this entire debacle about the insult on the Prophet of Islam, that one would see somewhat of a toning down, because we saw some of the Arab nations, demanding an apology, and we know India had taken certain action, but it seems to be of no avail, because it does appear as if it's back to normal business.
Before answering that question, I want to tell you about myself. So, I am a Hindu Rajput. I am from Varanasi. I have studied in JNU, Jawaharlal Nehru University. I study Middle East. I work for an Indian Army think tank, and I am a woman. So I am both a majority and a minority in the, in every sense of the word. So I know what I'm saying. And I'm saying this because of my, I have researched on this area. So if you look at it, I'm not going to say that there is no Islamophobia. There must be. I'm not going to refute that argument. But what I want to say is that Islamophobia in India, I feel that it is very minuscule. It is not to the extent as it is portrayed in the outside world. What is there is more in the Indian context is the sense of otherization. So this sense of otherization tends to, exaggerate this limited Islamophobia that exists. It flares it up. Now, the sense of otherization that I'm talking about, it is not specific, and that's why I gave the example of myself. The sense of otherization is not specific to Islam. It is there everywhere in the Indian society because of its diversity, because of the disparities that are there in the country, because of the limited resources that we have. Now, this sense, and that's why every South Indian becomes a Madrasi, every Northeastern is from a different nationality, every UP wala or a Bihari becomes a laborer or a blue collar worker. So there is a sense of otherization that exists in the Indian society, and we cannot refute that it doesn't. Now, coming to the sense of otherization in terms of Islam, When it comes to sense of otherization for Islam, it is not specific to Islam. In India, the sense of otherization for Islam is Pakistan centric. So whenever whatever happens, you are sent to Pakistan, metaphorically. I was also sent to Pakistan many a times when I was in JNU. So all of this, so there is a fear, there is an insecurity because of the history that we had, the historical baggage that we have with Pakistan, the amount of low scale conflicts that we have had, the state sponsored terrorism that has been there, the amount of conflicts and wars that we have fought with the neighboring country. So because of that, this fear, this state of fear that exists in India is because of this, Pakistan centric Islamic fear that is there. Now, all of this is because of the fact that there is a lack of awareness in India. All these kinds of sense of authorization that I have just told you, it is because of the fact that there is severe lack of awareness in the country. And the tweet that you mentioned about, that is also because of the lack of awareness. And that is one thing I feel that India has not worked upon. You were talking about the, the rebuttal that we got from the Arab countries. Why did it happen? Because, BJP government or the existing dispensation, it forgot that the times have changed. When the predecessor of BJP government was formed in 1960s, when it was established first time, it was a pro. Now, there is I have a problem with this word pro, because anything which is pro automatically becomes anti to something. That has to change, anything pro cannot be anti to something. So this party, the Janata Party that was established in 1960s, it was established as a pro-Hindu party. It did not mean that it was anti-Muslim. Eventually it became, maybe, I don't know. So it was a pro-Hindu party which was formed because it felt that allegedly Congress was softening towards Pakistan. So that was the main idea behind the formation of this party, Janata Party, that was there. So over a period of time, like I said, that the times have changed. Today, when you say Muslim, it does not just mean Pakistan. Today you have so many countries that you deal with. The 5 countries, who are your strategic partners out of the 30 strategic partners that you have, are Muslim countries, are from the Middle East. So if this is the situation, 55% of your energy, like from the 84% of your energy requirement, 55% comes from Middle East, right? Top 25 trading partners we are talking about, 4 of them are from the Middle Eastern countries. 3 and 4 are Middle Eastern countries, Arab countries. So all of this, so India has not, I wanted to write an article on this, that Middle East is important. India recognizes it, but it fails to internalize. So we have failed to internalize that, the world is changing. Today, you are dealing with more Muslim countries. You are not just constrained towards Pakistan. So your spectrum has to widen. And, problem with us academics is we also, we also fall into the gambit of that conflict entrepreneurs to some extent, because what we are doing is we are just mudslinging. We are only asking the wrong questions. We are not asking the right questions. The right question that needs to be asked to the government to India is, despite all of this, despite the importance that I just stated of Middle East to India, there is no Middle Eastern think tank in India. There's only one, which is online. So you don't have Middle Eastern think tank. You are talking about all sorts of things, all sorts of partnerships you are doing, but you don't have a think tank that deals with Middle East. In all the think tanks that are existing in India, only one has a center on West Asian studies. I mean, we call Middle East West Asia in India. That is MPIDSA. That is the only institute which has a West Asian center. So West Asia is not preferred as a source of study. So how do you increase your, spectrum? How do you widen your spectrum? You can't do that. On Islamic studies, I can tell you hundreds of things. There are 95 Islamic institutions in India, by the way. 95 higher education institutions. I'm not talking on madrasas. There are 10 Islamic accreditation agencies that are existing in the country. All of that is there, but you have to, like, if you talk to a common Indian and you ask them the Gulf countries, they will not be able to tell you. They will not be able to tell you which are the Middle Eastern countries. So why this lack of awareness that is there, that has to be filled, that has to be answered. In universities, only 3 universities in the country, central universities, have West Asian studies, have Middle Eastern studies, that too at MPhil and PhD level. At master's level in 2 institutions, Jamia and Aligarh, that too, they are minority institutions. In South India, there are only 2 universities which these. So there is no, where is the awareness? Your awareness, I'm not talking about the awareness in the common Indian, I'm talking about the awareness here in the educated society. That is also lacking. Nobody knows what Islam is. I very well remember Professor Mujibur Rahman's address. He said, we had a talk on understanding Islam, and he says there is no Islam, there is no one Islam, there are Islams. Exactly. Indian Islam is very different from other countries' Islam. So, there is an indigenization that is there in all these Islams that are there. So we somehow, unfortunately enough, we have not been asking the right questions. And that has created more gulf. That has created more, problems. So, so I think that is what we need to address.
Your voice.
You're on mute.
Mute.
Yes, when we look at India and Israel and looking at the relationship between the two, obviously it is not only limited to a military cooperation between the two. And looking at India and how India has positioned itself, to a large extent, it would rely on the likes of the Gulf countries, on the Middle East, on Saudi Arabia, purely in terms of gas. We know the expats that are working out in those parts of the world, bringing in dollars into India. So, on that side, taking care of India and its, I would say, employment or labor problem, gas problems. It has got a relationship with Russia as far as its gas needs are concerned. But looking at Israel as well, apart from military cooperation, there are 2 specific areas where we know India is highly reliant, and one being the agricultural industry, which is massive, which is huge in India. The other is water conservation as well. And we know the technology that Israel actually possesses. So this is where this relationship is being cemented or coming together or glued together, and that is why this relationship or this bond is so strong.
First, I'd like to come to the Islamophobia issue and the bulldozers and so on, unless you have the bulldozer question later on. The point coming that the reaction...
Continue.
Yeah, the reaction of the Arab countries, the OIC, on the so-called insult to the Prophet Muhammad, basically they've only come out on that issue. It is only on the issue of religion that they've responded. The Arab countries and the OIC do not speak out on the human rights issues in this country. Because after the protests, when the bulldozers are out again, none of the Arab Islamic countries spoke out. So let's not have many illusions about these countries, about their commitment to the Indian Muslims when they are not in commitment to the Palestinian Arabs. So I don't have any illusions, and these are those same countries that are responsible for the genocide in Yemen, to supporting the ISIS and Al Qaeda in Syria, and the horrors that they've wreaked in the region. The other point is that I think what Manjari is saying is true. Most of the Islamophobia is about the media. The media is now battering the Indian masses with the Hindu-Muslim problem and with all kind of anti-Muslim rhetoric day in and day out. And this entire Nupur Sharma episode. And again, let's understand that Nupur Sharma was kind of, she was instigated into coming out and the remarks against the Prophet. It was that Dr. Taslim Rahmani was insulting the Shivling that brought out this kind of the kind of reaction from Nupur. And the point is that I think Indian Muslims are kind of trying to wait out the storm. The last 8 years have been horrendous, not only for Indian Muslims, for large sections of society, but Indian Muslims are facing the worst onslaught from this fascist Hindutva government. I had said it a long time ago that the bulldozers are basically part of the collective punishment, and this is again comes out from Israel. This is not about bulldozers who are attacking the houses of the, in the slums of Bombay, which we had in the 80s. This is not about a class kind of warfare. This is about bulldozing communities in terms of collective punishment. This is basically Israeli policy, which the Hindutva government in Delhi under Modi has picked up. So again, I said there is and this mindset of being insecure about Pakistan is ridiculous, because this is happens to be the only majority in the world that is scared of the minority. And this majority seems to be more scared ever since this great Hindu leader has come. The point is, there is a solution to Kashmir, which was practically agreed upon by Atal Bihari Vajpayee, who was a moderate Hindu leader, widely respected. Atal Bihari Vajpayee and Musharraf nearly signed that agreement. And that was the agreement that they could have reached. But there is also another agenda, that if the India-Pakistan relationship keeps on worsening, the entire, the Indian Muslims then become the big target, because the enemy is across the border, but the enemy's co-religious are out here. So that helps to polarize the Hindu voter out here. So there is a logic behind the madness of this government, which keeps on targeting the, Pakistan to worsen the situation between Hindus and Muslims out here. But the point being that I still believe that Indian society is different. We are not like Israel, for God's sakes. And let us not, Inayat Bhai, confuse Israel, Palestine, and India, Kashmir, please.
Yeah.
We did not agree to the two-nation theory, just as the Palestinians did not agree to the two-nation theory. The Palestinians did not want the partition of Palestine along Jewish and Arab Muslim Christian lines, nor did India, secular India, want the partition of the British colonialists partitioned Palestine, and the British colonialists partitioned India. And Kashmir is still a pending issue of that partition, that period. But if you're again talking of Kashmir being occupied, because the point is that the Hindutva elements out here and the Islamists, they both want to conflate the Kashmir and the Palestinian problem. Palestine has a different solution altogether, because the Palestinians were ethnically cleansed. The Kashmiris have not been ethnically cleansed, they're living in their region. In fact, the minority Hindus, Pandits, were ethnically cleansed in 1890 by certain Islamists from Kashmir. So by just conflating Kashmir and Palestine, Israel and India, we are doing great injustice to the cause of Palestine, to the cause of Kashmir, and to the Indian progressive secular forces that are still committed to Palestine and still stand with the people of Kashmir. So this Islamist attitude of understanding is the Zionist understanding in the Hindutva right wing and the Islamist right wing. They all have the same, and the Christian right wing, they all have the same kind of understanding of the world, which is basically based on religion, without going into the historical roots and the political complexities of those periods. So
Yes.
yeah, I'll just get there. Yeah.
No problem. Dr. Manjari, in June 2021, you wrote an article about the Indian response to the Hamas-Israeli conflict. And you raise a very, very important point in terms of Indian foreign policy and how that had shifted ideologically, and also you looked at it from a moral perspective as well. And I think it's still very, very relevant in terms of what you wrote, I would say, a year ago. And also at the same time, looking at some of the latest, your latest thoughts or the latest article as well, where you looked at the defense cooperation between India and Israel. And just your thoughts on this foreign policy and the morality behind the Indian government and its current foreign policy towards Israel.
So that's what I'm saying today. If you look at in the international relations today is guided by realpolitik, right? So India is no exception to that formula. India is also using its realpolitik. So for a very long time, like I said, that the ideological underpinning that was there in the relationship, because of which the relationship could not be furthered, that has been sort of warded off. That is something that India has stopped doing. So India right now, like I said, see that's what the problem is. I mean, as soon as you say India and Israel relationship, one feels that, oh, now India and Palestine relationship is going to suffer. That is not, I mean, that is not something that has to be there. So this dehyphenation that has happened between India and Israel and India and Palestine, like I said, it's India and Israel and India and Palestine. So there is more scope probably. It's just that how do you use this space to further your relationship? Israel has been able. Israel is smart that way. It has been furthering its relations because it understands. You were talking about agriculture and water. It understands that these are the areas wherein India would need help. I mean, majority of the Indians are employed in these sectors. I mean, agricultural sector. So this is where it gives its help. So it's smart that way. It knows where to hit the target. Whereas with Palestine, what are the areas that you are going to deal with? Like I said, that today the relationship is being pragmatic. Morality is there, moral understanding is there. I mean, I think that was the reason why I wrote in that Israel Hamas article that India did not say anything out loud. India was neutral at at every level, even at the UNSC, even at the UNGA. It was neutral. It said what it said, and it had stopped saying certain things, like it has stopped using the term East Jerusalem. So this is a shift that has taken place. Whether it is positive or negative, I leave up to the spectators.
Yes, thank you for that, Dr. Manjari. Now, just coming back to you, Feroze, and just following up from what Dr. Manjari has been saying, that India obviously there has been a shift, in their policy over a period of time. But again, coming back to what is of benefit to India, and I think that seems to be what matters most. And the world, or the Muslim world in general, has not seen through this, or they refuse to see through this. Like you mentioned, that they haven't spoken out against human rights abuses, because India is guilty of human rights abuses. They wouldn't speak out against human rights abuses by Israel or anywhere else around the world. Or to a large extent, what we see from countries within the OIC, they are relevantly impotent when it comes to speaking out against injustice, against oppression, because they themselves are oppressors. You mentioned the example of Yemen, which is another classic example. So, how does one actually reconcile the two when, when we find that all these parties are guilty of the same?
Essentially, see, India is playing it smart in terms of even reaching out to Iran this time. A lot of things are turned around post Afghanistan. Afghanistan is a turning point, as much as Ukraine is a turning point. Afghanistan is a turning point, and especially for India, when our eyes opened up that going along with this so-called Quad and with the US agenda for the region is not going to serve our interests. So now we have India once again reaching out to Iran. The Iranian foreign minister over there in India, I also met him in Bombay, where now they are likely to sign the 25 agreement, just as the Iranians are signed with China and with Russia. And India is again going to start playing its role in Chabahar, and along with our railway lines through Iran into Central Asia. So that's happening. All I'm trying to say is that India could have been looking at its realpolitik interests in South Africa as well, but there we did take a stand. The world of today is far less principled than it was, say, 40 years ago, where we are dealing with a colonial settler state. Israel is a European colony, a settler state. It has colonized Palestinian land. And here we are learning, taking tips from Israeli agriculturists for help in India, which is, not confounding to me, again, shameful to me. And again, I'm telling you, Israel has not much to offer on organic agriculture. India has great expertise. We have massive farmers movements now on that sector. We know how to conserve water. I don't even know what we're doing with the Israelis. And the other thing I'd like to say that Israel as a military power is long done with. This relationship, I mean, the point is that the axis of the resistance, I think with Ismail Haniyeh visiting Lebanon, something else is happening. Because the Israelis, and again, I'll go back to the India-Israel kind of relationship. Uh, the slogan "Mandir wahi banayenge," we will build a temple at that spot. That is the very slogan given by Ariel Sharon to Netanyahu, to now even Bennett, for the matter, where the Al-Aqsa is under attack. So the point is that we have this bizarre Christian Zionism and Jewish Zionism come together. Destruction of the Al-Aqsa. The destruction of the Al-Aqsa is the powder keg for World War III. And now the resistance is ready. Iran, Iraq, Syria, the Lebanese resistance, Yemen, the other resistance force in the region. Israel is fighting a losing war. Recently, we had Netanyahu to the Benny Gantz to Ehud Barak saying that the Israel, under the Hasmoneans and under David, we lasted only 80 years and we are approaching that period. I don't think, as Manjari rightly said, we don't have the think tanks in this country. We are not looking far ahead. That region is facing a war situation because the Israelis do not want a solution. The Palestinian struggle settled for a massive compromise under Yasser Arafat, agreeing to only 22% of their national land. They gave away 78%. What more can a national liberation movement do? And now the Zionists want all of the West Bank and East Jerusalem and Gaza, and even go way beyond that, as we know, the Greater Israel Project from the Nile to the Euphrates. The point is that the Palestinian resistance has managed to, for more than 100 years, because it goes back all to 1917. That is India's tradition. India's tradition is about 105 years of supporting Palestine, or is it 30 years officially of standing with Israel? Those are those two traditions we need to decide on the eve of our 75th anniversary, independence anniversary. So the point is, I see Israel is rather ephemeral. It is not going to be around in the region for long. It is a losing site now, and the next war will witness the defeat of Israel, the end of Zionist Israel, just as you saw the end of the apartheid state, the collapse of apartheid ideology, the people live there. Here we have the collapse of Zionism as a ruling ideology, the people will live there. So that's where I'm at right now. India is backing the wrong horse in this region. And so the Saudis, so the UAE.
Just from what Feroze is saying, India backing the wrong horse, and if obviously the failure of Israel and India's reliance on Israel, what could the consequences be for India if it follows the present course that it is and the present trajectory?
See, I don't agree to that. I feel that both the partners are very smart partners, because if you look at it right now, I mean, of course, that is also exaggerated. The Atmanirbhar Bharat, the self-reliance India, the sloganeering that is going on. So India wants to indigenize its defense, sector. So, because you know that India is one of the second largest importer of arms, so it wants to reduce that arms import from other countries. It wants to indigenize it. Now, if that indigenization happens, Israel, because Israel is exporting about 42% of its total imports to India. So the percentage of Israel would go down. So, there is no much space available for India and Israel, because if you look at the defense sector that exists between India and Israel, it is primarily based on the arms import that we get from Israel. Other things are not formalized yet. Other things are not happening to that level. Whether it is on the military training or all sorts of things, those are like they are happening at a very lower level.
We did import Pegasus as well.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, that we are yeah, of course. So that's what I'm saying, that we have been importing arms. So that is the main attraction in the defense sector. So if India actually wants to indigenize, then this thing will go down. So how are India and Israel cooperating then? But then, like I said, they are smart partners. So what Israel is doing is, it's saying that we are going to co-produce. We are going to help you in co-producing. We are going to help you in your Make in India and your Atmanirbhar, Bharat initiatives. So they are now working together in these sectors. So that's how you partner. If you're thinking long distance, that's what you do. In Israel's case, the very interesting thing is that until now we have had diplomats, the defense attaches, or the ambassadors. Israel has started a new soft power. It is sending agriculture attaches and water attaches to countries. So India right now has an agriculture as well as water attaches. So that's what I'm saying. They are so committed to these things. The 30, the centers of excellences that are there, I have not visited. I want to visit one of them at least. So I think they are faring well. They are working well. And of course, I agree that India has a traditional agricultural expertise. But beyond that, we don't have it, right? Beyond that, we'll have to, and because Indian soil is getting deteriorated because of salinity and all sorts of things, alkalinity and all of that. So you need technological advancement in terms of increasing your produce. So all of that, I think, so I feel that Israel and India are going to continue to be good partners, and they are going to be innovative in some form or the other. If one door closes, I think the other will open. So that's what I have to say.
Yes. Feroze,
That
one
I'd
door
like to
opens,
just
the other
say,
door closes. That's what
no, I'd
Dr.
like
Manjari.
no, it's not about the India Israel. That is a different issue. The point is what is happening within Israel is the issue now. You have extreme right wing. Out of the 120 parliamentarians, 110 are extreme right wing fanatics, or one you or the other. If you have fanatics ruling your country, you're going to take that country down. Israel is collapsing as a society. They don't have a stable political system. You have an election every year. That is how divided they are. That is how divided they are. Okay, so they can keep on exporting arms and weapons and Pegasus and trying to control New York and London to Paris. But as a society, they're collapsing. You have young Jews moving away from Judaism in America because Judaism is conflated with Israel. That is what they're doing to their own religion. Okay, so the point is that the real state is, I'm telling you again, Ehud Barak, Benny Gantz, the current defense minister, and Netanyahu have all said that the Hasmonean kingdom and the kingdom of David lasted 80 years. We are reaching that point. Netanyahu said, will we ever get to 100 years? Is what, if we do that, it's good enough. I read Israeli newspapers very closely. I observe what is happening there very closely. The next war will see the end of Israel. That is it. They cannot stand up to the combined resistance axis. Israel has lost in Lebanon. Israel has been defeated in Syria because the Saudis and Turks are all involved in Syria. They have not been able to unseat the anti-imperialist government of Bashar al-Assad over there. They've been defeated in Iraq. Iran continues to stand strong. Yemen has stood strong. This resistance axis, not UAE, not Saudi, these are countries that have been bought out, sold out. They can keep on exporting gas and whatever they want to. But they are part of the collaborator axis. So the point is, it is the resistance axis, and I'm glad that India is now reaching out to Iran. It has seen through, because under Manmohan Singh we began to buy less and less oil from them. Under Modi, it's come to zero. But after Afghanistan, after Russia, Ukraine, now the world is changing. Where, look at the world, where the summit of the Americas, where Biden is like kind of isolated America. Europe and America are isolated in the world, where Zelensky can't get two countries in Africa to talk to him. So the point is, the world is rapidly changing. With the collapse of the West, Israel will collapse. The imperial West is collapsing, and Israel will collapse along with the West. So until that time, we can keep on having our little deals with Israel, but Israel is not there. A colonizing country will not last. The Palestinians will get the freedom, and the Israeli colonization will end.
But as I say it, yeah, if I may say something. Yeah, so don't you feel, Feroze, that Palestinians themselves are divided? The Arab world uses the Palestinian cause for their election manifesto. Only that
they don't do that at all. That also is gone now. UAE, Saudis,
so then
Qatar,
who is fighting the cause then? Then of course Israel is winning, right?
No, that's
it is
you
winning
didn't hear what I was
fighting.
saying. You didn't hear what I was saying. It is the resistance bloc. That is about Iran, it is about Iraq, it is about Syria, it is about Lebanon, it is about Yemen and Palestine. This is the resistance bloc around which the entire region is chaining. Okay, Saudis and the UAE do not matter. They are part of the collaborator axis. So Israel and the Saudis and the UAE can keep on thinking they're winning and doing what they want to. But the next war, see, the Israelis do not have the guts to go into Gaza. I've been to Gaza.
No,
We let
but
the
the
first
resistance
station.
bloc that you are talking about, that itself is divided. It is divided.
Where's
Plus,
the
it has
divide?
its own domestic. It has its own
Who's
domestic
divided?
problems.
No,
It
that is
has
fine.
its
Every
own
country has its
domestic
own
problems, right?
every problem has a domestic problem, but the resistance axis is united. Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, the Lebanese Hezbollah, and the left over there, the national resistance, they are all united. Ismail Haniyeh going to Lebanon is a big sign of something to come. The Israelis do not have the guts to go into Gaza with their tanks. Gaza is only a 34 by 12 kilometer strip. Today, the Israelis cannot even go into that strip with all the tanks. What are we talking about? What is Israel's military power? And think tanks out here have not made that study. I was in Beirut during the war of 2006. We were there in Beirut when Israel was bombing Beirut. Our tables were shaking at that time. And we have seen the victory of the Lebanese resistance. And that time only I said, Israel is the military power is finished. Because Israel was expecting a march into Beirut within 6 days. After 34 days, they were stuck at the border. They lost tanks and tanks. 20,000 Israeli soldiers had to turn tail and run back to Tel Aviv. So Israel is a military power. They're very good with their aerial attacks. Ask them to come with the army into Lebanon. Ask them to even go into Jenin. They will not be able to do that. The problem in Palestine is the Palestinian Authority, which is the collaborator security force. But lots of things are going to change. In the West, the last Gaza war showed the unity of the forces within the West Bank, and in Palestine 1948, we had an uprising all over historic Palestine. Something else happened. And Gaza stood up to protect Jerusalem. Gaza fired the rockets first at Jerusalem, and Netanyahu had to sue for peace after 11 days. It was not Hamas and the Gaza resistance that was willing to stop. So now the resistance from Yemen, Yemenis can fire their from Riyadh to UAE. They can blow those guys up. Okay, and you had massive genocide of the Yemeni people. That's why I said I don't count on these Arab chaps. It is about who's with the resistance and who's against the resistance. Okay, so you have Algeria and Tunisia there. You have and the point is one of the things I understood that there is a turning on the decline. Eurasia, Africa, South America, Central America are on the upsurge, and Israel is tied its apron strings to America and Europe. So those apron strings are going asunder, and so will Israel. And I don't think it's wrong. I think I see 10 years in our, why you can get us again after 10 years, we'll see where we are and do this. But it's been an interesting discussion because Manjari has also had his insights. As a think tank from JNU, she definitely has, a lot of things that she has added to the discussion today. Yeah, that's all I'd say.
Well, certainly, and unfortunately, time has actually flown. We've got about 6 minutes or so to go before we end the program. And I think also following up from what Feroze, what you are saying, obviously, one cannot rely on the governments, on the Gulf states, on the likes of Saudi Arabia. But we know that on the ground, there is this huge movement. Civil society, humanitarian organizations have actually woken up. And not only woken up as far as Israel is concerned, to an extent, Dr. Manjari, India is also under pressure on the ground, considering, as you said, is sometimes the media may blow things out of proportion, but at the end of the day, the world is watching, the world is looking, and the world is noticing as to what is taking place in India.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I'm saying that there is a need for course correction. There is a need to address this lack of awareness that is there. So you have to widen your spectrum. You have to make your public aware of the fact that these things and of course, I mean, I don't see in India that there is enough of interfaith dialogues. I think that is one thing that we need in this country. We need to have interfaith dialogues in this country, and not just concentrated in Delhi, in every part of the country.
True.
These dialogues should take place because this is very important. I mean, we used to have in JNU this 5-day 6-day lecture series on understanding Islam. It was of immense help. It was of immense help, I'm telling you. So these things are required. These things, until unless, and it should. This is the onus of the universities. This is the onus of the think tanks, that they should be doing it. What are these cultural centers for? You build in, you bring in your, the artists, and I mean everybody, the intellectual community, all of them should come together and talk about, and freely talk about all the,
But
all the issues that are there. I think if this thing you can do, I mean, other things you can just say, no, we are not, we have a problem. I mean, as Indians, we are retaliatory in nature. We are reactionary. We react to things. We have to start taking proactive measures, and this is what these are the things that you do to, to not fall into the same pit again. So I think these things are very much
but
required in the current.
Mr. Inayat, the point is on this very question. One is the interfaith dialogue, but there is
Yeah.
also need for Indian Muslims to introspect on their own, their own understanding of Islam, so to say. Where the post-independence, you had the Indian Hindu community that went in for reforms, they liberalized and they became secular. But Indian Muslims continue to remain conservative and regressive against gender reforms, against gender equality. The point is that one is to have interfaith dialogue, but of two types. One is to say that all religions say the same thing is a load of rubbish. All religious texts came at different times, said different things
Of
because of
course.
different political, social, and economic contexts. So there are fundamental commonalities and fundamental differences. We tend to speak only on the fundamental commonalities so we don't hurt the other person. There are fundamental differences. Now, I am opposed to the word kafir. I find it highly offensive. Indian Muslims got offended by Nupur Sharma's so-called insult to the Prophet, but factually she asked the right question. Because the Hadith Bukhari speaks of this, Hazrat Aisha's age. At the age of 6, they were engaged and consummated the marriage at 9. That is part of the Hadith. Now, there are Hadith others who say that she was 19. So first, let the Indian Muslims settle the matter, or the global Muslim community settle the matter, before we start getting offended. The point is that religious texts have already taken the right, internalized the right to offend other people. Please understand what I'm saying. The Hindu scriptures are very, very casteist. They offend, they're very, very patriarchal. They offend women. Indian Muslims, the scriptures where we are saying don't pray to idols, it offends people. You call people kafirs, it offends people. Okay? The Jewish text is highly genocidal. The first 5 books of the Old Testament are highly genocidal. Now, the Quran supports Joshua and David that colonized Palestine. Please listen to what I'm saying. Joshua and David colonized Palestine. We are supporting those prophets. What are we doing here? Okay. The Old Testament was essentially a tribal book. Jesus universalized the concept of God. Now, that is about the resurrection, the crucifixion. The Quran said there was no crucifixion. Now, are we going to say I'm offended every time, or are we going to have a mature dialogue? So the problem in India is you cannot have a mature dialogue without offending another. It's become ridiculous. Okay. So this right to offend has already been internalized by people of religion, by the religious books. And when there is an attempt by intellectuals to talk about this, either we are killed, as in Pakistan with blasphemy laws. Indian Muslims are demanding a blasphemy law. Please understand that we need a liberal, modern Muslim to actually have a dialogue with modern Hindus on the other side. Because we've had modern liberal Hindus on the other side, but we had a very conservative Muslim community. So post-partition, the kind of mess the partition was a disaster, especially for the Indian Muslims. We got divided into 3 parts: Pakistan, Bangladesh, India. And here we are faced, for the last 75 years, we've been facing the hell of partition. And then we have Islamists saying that Kashmir break away. If Kashmir breaks away, I don't know what will happen to the Indian Muslim community. Okay. So when we talk of Kashmir, please understand it's very different from Palestine. There are problems that Indian Muslims have created post-partition, which has led to the rise of Hindutva. One was the Shah Bano, where a 60-year-old Muslim lady was demanding compensation at the time of divorce. She was just asking for 500 rupees per month. That case went to the Supreme Court. Indian Muslims came out on the street in lakhs that are religious danger. That led to the right-wing Hindu mobilization in this country. Then on Salman Rushdie created the same mess. Every time Islam is in danger. After Babri Masjid, Indian Muslims have realized coming out on the streets is counterproductive. Let's go to the courts and fight it out there. And that's what they've been doing. Indian Muslims have learned. The recent movements against the anti-CA laws, the citizenship laws. Because India is right now in 1930s, 40s Germany. We are 1930s, 40s Germany right now. Okay. So these citizenship laws that came targeting Indian Muslims, for the first time you had lakhs and lakhs, hundreds of thousands Indian Muslims and especially women who came out on the streets, and they were totally non-violent and constitutional movements. We had Mahatma Gandhi's photo there, we had Dr. Ambedkar's photo there, Maulana Abul Kalam Azad's photo there, and it was a total non-violent satyagraha, which shook the foundations of the Indian state. They had to go back. And from there came the farmers' movement. The farmers' movement was modeled on the lines of the Shaheen Bagh movement. The farmers are not saying that. I've told them to say that again and again. Okay. But that sitting on the streets of Delhi, or the border of Delhi rather, that all came from the Shaheen Bagh movement led by Muslim women who showed the path of satyagraha. And this was the same satyagraha of Gaza. For 1.5 years, the people of Gaza were marching to the borders, being shot at every Friday. That was the biggest non-violent movement after World War II or in human history. For 1.5 years, they marched through the borders of Gaza. You can't have a bigger example of a Gandhian movement, which the Gandhians in this country are also not aware about. That is how, inward looking in this country has become. Manjari is right. We don't know what's happening in the world. And there are good things happening in the world. Colombia has got a left-wing president. In France, we have the rise of the left. In London, now we have strikes against the inflation. In India, we have a youth movement that has come out against this mad scheme by Modi. I hope you're aware of it, the Agnipath scheme. You should do a program on India more often. Because India is being discussed as a land where the next genocide could take place. We could be the next Rwanda or Burundi out here. That is how scary this situation has become. But we are right here. We have Hindu friends standing with us. We have people of all communities standing with us. The Indian Christian community is facing a massive onslaught. But India is different. We are not Israel, for God's sakes. India is different. We've lived our lives together for thousands of years. We are a very diverse culture, a very beautiful culture. This is a period of a little, dark moment of your history, but we will overcome it, and we will overcome it with unity. In fact, with the coming Quit India Day, we have given a call, Nafrate Bharat Chodo, because our call was Angrez Bharat Chodo, British Quit India. So the 9th August, 80 years of the Quit India movement, Tushar Gandhi, the great grandson of Mahatma Gandhi, is a good friend of mine from Bombay itself. He gave a call, hatred, leave India, unite India, Samaj Jodo, Insan Jodo. Unite society, unite humanity. That is the India that we will recreate. Modi is a passing phenomenon. We are a 5,000-year history. A few Modis come and go. It's okay.
Well, I must say it's been fascinating talking to both you, Dr. Manjari Singh, and also to Feroze Mithiborawala this evening. And Feroze, yes, I will hold you to that. We will definitely have a lot more discussions like we have had tonight, and because there is a huge interest. And I think looking at us in South Africa, many of us are of Indian roots, Indian heritage, and I think many of us still have family out in India, so we still have got this link with India, and we take a keen interest as to what is happening in your part of the world. But unfortunately, time has run out. And once again, I'd like to thank both of you for coming on, for being part of the panel discussion tonight, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
It was an excellent discussion. And Manjari, good for being here. It's good. It was
Same here. Same feeling.
Yes, I know it's just past midnight. It's around about 12:30 a.m. So obviously we appreciate your sacrifice as well, staying up this late. But please take care, and we wish you safety.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, that brings us to the end of another discussion tonight on Wednesday night with myself, Inayat Wadi. And with that, I'm signing off from myself and the team. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.